It's Tara. Welcome to A Loop Through a Loop. We're going to talk about some knitting as usual and a couple of things thrown in. This is officially the 1 year anniversary of the first episode. To kick things off, last month I mentioned that one of my FOs was Andrea Mowry's Birds of a Feather inside a small project bag, and I wanted to be able to give it away to one of you. So what I'm going to do right now is draw the winner. So Alexa, choose a number between 2 and 100.
Here's a number between 2 and 100. It's 90.
90. And the winner is, where's 90? There's 90. The winner is Misty Lucy. So I will send you a message via Ravelry. We'll get all of the details that we need sorted out, and I will get that sent off to you. Something else that I mentioned in last month's podcast was a Q&A, and I have those questions pulled up here. And I thought the best way to kick off the Q&A, question 1 is, what is my favorite pieces that I've knit? And so I just thought I would wear it. My all-time favorite knitted piece that I've made is my stone crop designed by Andrea Mowry. Knit in 3 Irish Girls War of the Roses. That's the minty green color. And then the color work is Spin Cycle Sunset Strip. This is my all-time favorite knit piece. If you want to know more about the knit story behind this piece, you can check out episode 2, and I explain color choices and more information on that episode. So be sure to check that out. And to segue that into our second question, they wanted to know, what is my favorite Andrea Mowry pattern? Which sweater pattern would I recommend for an advanced beginner, or yarn substitutions for the pattern? My very first pattern that I fell in love with real hard by Andrea Mowry was Wool and Honey. I originally knit that out of Rowan Alpaca Classic, and then I accidentally felted it, and then I went ahead and just gave it away. But I would definitely make it that again, and I would make it in the same yarn now that I know better. So that was my first love. And then my second love is going to be Pink Fizz, even though I haven't made it yet. That was another one that made me gasp when I saw it. So those are definitely my favorite. As far as what I would recommend for an advanced beginner, I feel like that's kind of tricky. It depends on the knitter and their willingness to try new things. How much grit do you have when you go to knit? I know for me, if I want this sweater, if I want it bad enough, I'll learn what I have to get it done. Does that make sense? Like, if I have a whole bunch of walls up of, oh, I can't do that, oh, I can't do that, oh, I can't do that, and that stops me from knitting anything, that changes things. So what I would say is just what I do, and when I go to look at a pattern, I look at what techniques are involved. If there's a ton of techniques I've never heard before, I'm not ready for that. But if there's just 1 or 2, like maybe there's a tubular cast on and a bobble, you could tackle 2 things, you know, you could do it. I gravitate towards Andrea's patterns, not just because I like the aesthetic, but also because her patterns are very well written. She does have tutorials that go along with them. There are tons of people who have knit her patterns, so you can always go back and read project notes. So I'm afraid that I can't answer as far as a pattern recommendation. My recommendation is, if you want it bad enough, you'll knit it. You know your knitting habits, you know your tastes, and yeah, I firmly stand by, if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen. If you're not willing to do what needs to be done to knit that piece, then that's the wrong pattern. The last part of that question was asking about yarn substitutions. When it comes to yarn substitutions, normally I'm like, just knit with whatever you want. But the more that I've knit, the more finessed my thinking process is about that. I look and see what kind of fiber the original piece was knit in, and I keep that in mind when I'm choosing my yarns. So I also try to make sure that I pick out what are the qualities of that yarn and what do they do when you create your fabric. Alpaca and cotton generally kind of stretch out a little bit, and linen has a good drape, and so does silk. Wool tends to keep its structure pretty well. If it's single ply, may not hold its stitch definition as clean and crisp. If you want really good stitch definition, then maybe you want something with a tighter ply. So I guess, I never thought about it till now, but you don't know how much you know until someone asks, and then you start adding on all of these things, be like, oh, but then this, oh, but then this. And you realize maybe that question's harder than what you realize. So the woolen honey sweater, that called for a fingering weight, I think a superwash yarn, but I used a DK weight alpaca yarn and just knit it with my fabric and my tension in mind. I'm afraid my answer is really loosey-goosey and not really an answer at all, because more often than not, I don't use the yarn that they recommend, because I just want to play with what I have and what I can get my hands on and make do with that. So like I said, I'm real sorry. Those are my answers without actually giving real answers. That's why I feel comfortable taking risks and chances with my knitting, is because I kind of leave things open. That's all the questions I'm going to answer for right now. Let's jump into FOs. We are ready for our first check-in of the month. We are one day post Labor Day. The first object I have to show for you is a shawl knit from Julie Aslin Fino in the color Heart. Here it is. So we started this long skinny end. The ends are woven in, but I haven't cut them. We start with a garter section to lace, to garter, to lace, to garter, and I just kept going until the entire skein was pretty much gone. I did the bind off a few times because I was playing yarn chickens. The picot edges are there, but there aren't very many of them. This pattern is Nurmalin 2, and do I just go ahead and say, hi, I'm Tara and I'm from the United States, and everything I say is gonna sound like that. I knit this as a birthday gift that I'm going to send down to Texas to an honorary member of our family. The woman that, I don't wanna say babysat, because what she did was so much more, but she watched me and my brother when my mom had to go back to work. And I think she watched me from the time I was 6 weeks old until I went off to kindergarten. So she's a very, very important part of my growing up as a kid and becoming the person that I am. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this yarn when I received it. How pretty is that? But I knew since it had cashmere in it, I wanted it something like around the neck. And when I was talking to my mom, she mentioned, the birthday coming up, that I was like, I think I need to knit something for her. She's knit baby blankets for all of my babies. So I thought, for someone that knits for everyone else, I would like to knit something nice, special just for her. And this yarn was the first thing that popped into my head. She deserves like 100 skeins of this yarn. I think the size of this for one skein is pretty good. And since she lives down in Texas where it gets warm, I don't know that she would want something super large or huge. I will say that when I looked I used a US 5 needle on this. And when I looked at project pages online, everyone else's shawls looked way bigger than mine. So I guess in retrospect, I would probably use a US 6 if I wanted something that could be larger. I would definitely knit this again. I enjoyed this knit. It took about a week and a half to knit up. I just knit on that monogamously for a week and a half so that I can send it off to her. The second object I want to share with you is a pattern that I just finished last night. It is one of my own. I'm going to call this Aurora Tweed because the colors that I've used are shades of pink. And this is just my first sample. I knit the body of this 3 times. I did the decreases a couple of times. You know, the creative process is not always clean and spotless. So I'm gonna put it on. I still have some tweaks that I wanna make. It is fitted. I wanted something, if I scoot back, I wanted something that looked like tweed. And when you get up close, it is 3 colors. It is slipped stitches. It's easy. You knit 2, slip a stitch, okay? That's all you need to do. And you could use 1 color. You could use 2 colors. I used 3. You could use 4. You could do it with a rainbow. You can do it with as many or as few colors as you would want. The yarns that I used a skein of my Rowan Alpaca Classic in satin, and I went ahead and used this because this is the same skein that I used to swatch all the sweaters that I mentioned in last month's episode. I swatched for all 4 sweater choices, and this was the skein I had used for Pink Fizz. And I used 42 yards of the satin colorway from Rowan. In this mauve color, I used 48 yards. And in the burgundy, I used 82 yards, and that's because I also did the brim with this. These are all DK. I used a US 5 for the entire hat. In retrospect, I mean, I kind of like a little bit of a denser fabric just for longevity sake, and also just to kind of keep things warm. So I also stuck with the US 5 for the main fabric, but I would also recommend going up 1 needle size for the main fabric if you don't want something too dense, so then it's a little easier on your hands. The skills that I used to make the hat, I chose to do a tubular cast on for the 2x2 rib using the Andrea Mowry tutorial, but that is only a personal preference. We have slipped stitches. Like I said, that's all this is slipped stitches, and then some slip, knit 2 together for the decreases. Those are all the skills that you need in order to make this hat. I don't like classifying things as like easy, intermediate, advanced, whatever. From my own personal experience, I've watched other podcasters talk about patterns that I've made and how easy they were, and then I kind of had to struggle through it, or vice versa. They talked about how difficult of a time they had with a project and I flew through it. So it's all subjective. I would rather tell you about the skills involved. I want to publish the hat October 28th. That is the Friday before Halloween, so that we can kind of start rolling into November. This hat, just in the design process, took me about 3 or 4 days to design. I would say if you're interested in knitting this, within a week, you should be able to have a hat. So I think that's it. That's all I have for our first check-in. Sweater weather is coming. If you need me, I'll be snuggled in the corner. Before I leave you, somebody wanted to know what kind of glasses I'm wearing, which actually they didn't ask that in that thread. They asked it on the episode, but let me tell you. My eyeglasses for regular wear are smudged. The brand is Humphreys Eyewear. This video is not sponsored, but this is the case. I just got these at the optometrist office back home before we moved. I needed new glasses, like bad. And it was just the brand that I liked. I mean, it was just the frames I liked. So I think they were pretty reasonably priced. They're lightweight. I really like how light they are. On to whips. I have 2 that I'm gonna show you. My half and half triangles wrap, I've only knit a couple of rows since then. Life this month has been really life-y. And so I've only been able to get some knitting in here and there when I can like kind of make it happen for myself. So I've decided my half wrap that's in Vintage Celadon and True Turquoise, that's gonna be like a long-term project. I will just always pull that out whenever I feel the need to. I definitely want to finish it and complete it, but there is no rush. And so let's talk about the 2 whips I have to show you that are active. The first one I have is one that I had started last time, but it was quite small. And I've done quite a bit of work on it. This is Granada from 52 Weeks of Shawls. And I don't know if I can really say I'm halfway. Right now I'm just working on increasing it before we get into some decorative stitch patterns, which I'm really looking forward to. This is knit on size US 2, which is 2.75 millimeter needles, so they're pretty small. And the reason that this is hanging so nicely right now is because I did wet block it. Because the main fabric in the middle is stockinette stitch and the border is garter, means that there was some differences in how the fabric was laying when I was working on it. Garter tends to want to kind of scrunch up on itself. That's what makes it so squishy and lovely. Whereas stockinette tends to lay a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it, flat. So what was happening, I can describe what it was looking like. So I had my border, and what was happening is that this stockinette portion was really blousy. And I decided that before I continue on with this blanket, I need to make sure that this is going to block out and lay nicely, because if I'm working on 2.75 millimeter needles, I'm gonna need that to work out in the end. And the good news is it did. So now I'm going to get back into this. I took a break from it so that I could block it and see what it, after a couple of days of it drying, what the fabric would do. Normally when I block, I leave it out to dry for 2 days to make sure it's really dry, and any shrinking that would happen can happen and it would be okay. That is knit out of, I can show you here, Yarn Bee. You can see the clearance tag. I mentioned this last time, that Yarn Bee Color Idol, they no longer carry it. I was talking about how I thought maybe I would need one more skein. I got to Hobby Lobby and there was exactly one skein left, and I was like, okay, I see the sign, I got the skein. I should have exactly what I need now to get this baby blanket done, and my fingers need to get to working because that's gonna take a while. In the meantime, while that was drawing, I was contacted by Christy Archer. I've worked a little bit with her in the past, and she has this new one skein shawl out, and she asked if I wanted to help her promote it. And since she was so lovely and kind and generous the first time I worked with her, I wanted to be able to help her out the way that she helped me out. So her pattern is called All Buttoned Up. It should be published now on Ravelry, and on her website you can find it. I am knitting mine in this gorgeous purple. The name of, oh, it's upside down or backwards. The name of this purple is Lavender Dusk, and it does have some tonality in it. I love this shade of purple. Sometimes I'll pick up a skein of yarn and I'll look at it compared to the skin tone of my hand. Does it make my hand look dead, or does it look like a happy hand? And this was a happy hand moment. Christy's design is a crescent shawl. I'm trying to figure out the best way to show you this. Like if I hold it by the cord, then the shawl's technically upside down, but you can see the tonality. It features dropped stitches, which that was a learning curve for me, not because it was hard, but finagling the tension of the wrapped yarn to get back onto my needle took some practice. And then it also has some Estonian buttons right here, and I really like making those. I really love making those. So the great thing about All Buttoned Up, Christy's pattern, is that it's only one skein of yarn. I'm getting ready to go into my last set of sections. I think I have 2 more sections, and then I think I have an Estonian button section, and then one more section after that, and then I start the final end section. So I don't want to say too much because it's a paid for pattern, but It is beautiful. I'm excited to wet block this and then get to wear it. I am totally vibing on this color. And the great news is that Christy has given me a promo code for one of you lucky lovelies will get to win a copy of All Buttoned Up. Christy has requested that you subscribe to her YouTube channel. If you are on YouTube, hopefully you can subscribe to her channel. And if you're on Instagram, follow her on Instagram. If All Buttoned Up, and I'll post a picture here too of Christy's final project, because I realize a work in progress, you can't really see the full oomph of it. What I want you to comment on so that I know that you have followed her on Instagram and YouTube is leave a comment down below about what are you most drawn to in a knitting pattern. What is it when you see a new pattern that catches your eye, or in your gut you think, oh, I need to make that? So I'm excited for your answers for this. I'm so excited. And I forgot to mention back in the intro, in order to win the giveaway, you had to go onto Ravelry, onto the A Loop Through a Loop group, and put a comment in what was your best piece of advice that you've ever gotten about knitting. And there are 99 things that people have learned in their knitting. Like the number one, it's just so good. I'm not explaining it right. I'm so tired. I'm so sorry. What I want you to do is check it out and read them because they're so good. And when people first started sending them in, since I'm not good at the Ravelry community tab thing, I started commenting on stuff, and then I realized that when I left a comment, then that made it a post, so that was throwing off all the numbering. So then I had to go through and delete my comments on that thread. But I just was like, oh my gosh, yes, thank you for sharing, that's so good. And then I was like, oh wait, never mind. And while I'm mentioning the Ravelry group thread, if you haven't joined our A Loop Through a Loop group, go ahead and do that. There is a cowl going on right now. There are a couple pictures in there where the Through a Loop cowl, all you have to do is knit anything I've mentioned on the podcast. I mean, that's super easy. I feel like I've mentioned quite a bit. You can double dip, triple dip, quadruple dip. I don't care how many cowls you're doing. I don't really have any rules other than let's knit together and be friends. Is that good? And the cowl will end, I said it was going to end on Thanksgiving because that's my favorite holiday, but I think I'm going to change it and just say you have until the end of the year, the end of 2021. And I'm changing my mind because life for me this past month has kind of jerked around my time in a way I hadn't expected. And I just think, really, let's just do it till the end of the year. Like December 31st, we'll end it. I'll figure out something that we can all do to celebrate. Maybe another giveaway or something like that. If you're interested in, oh my God, my brain just stopped. If you're interested in donating anything for the giveaway, you can email me at aloopthroughaloop@gmail.com, and I can collect goodies to disperse and give out to our community if you would like that. Which now I'm going to segue that into future knitting. This works out great. So in last episode, I said a whip that's missing from my whip collection is a sweater, because sweater knitting is my absolute number one favorite. And I had 4 choices and I asked everyone to vote. And so the winner was Pink Fizz out of Rowan Alpaca Classic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this for more winter because I want to be able to participate in the Through a Loop cowl. And if I knit this, I mean, I guess I've just now mentioned it in the podcast, so I can knit it. But I feel like that's slightly deceitful. This was my swatch. What I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and knit another Blue Christmas, but this time in a single color. So this was my swatch. And in this swatch, I am holding Knit Picks gloss lace in Honestly, I don't remember the colorways, but you can go on my Ravelry page and I've got things listed. So this is Knit Picks Gloss Lace, and this is the mohair held together. And this was like an aha moment for me, is that I have Christy's yarn that she had sent me, and these marled together. This by itself, I was like, well, that could be pretty, and I could trudge through it. But then I put this with it, and I got excited. Not to mention the needle size just increased that I'm gonna need. This is a sweater I'm gonna cast on, but I have to finish my All Buttoned Up first, because here's a little backstory. All Buttoned Up calls for a size 8 needle. I don't know where in this house my size 8 needle tips have gone. I have no idea. These are 9s, and now I need them so I can start my sweater. So I've got to finish this. I got to finish that baby blanket. I mean, I've got so many things going on. I do want to show you the other 2 swatches just really quick from the other samples, in case you don't follow me on Instagram, if you're interested in seeing how those sweater choices or yarn choices knit up in a gauge swatch for those sweaters. Another choice that I had was Andrea Mowry's Illuminate sweater, and this is in Holst Garn Sweet Pea, and I held a Loft double. And so I think it's in the color Cosmopolitan. I really like this, like it a lot. So I will eventually get around to making it, but like I said, my time has kind of been manipulated in a way that is beyond my control. And so I'm just going to give myself permission to get to these projects when I get to them. And if I change my mind and I knit something else with that yarn instead, that's okay. And then my other swatch, I really like how this one turned out, is for Nurtured. And this is Yarn Bee Chloe yarn in the color Bisque, if I remember correctly. I liked the striping in it. So I'm excited about this too, but I'm gonna have to find those size 8 needles, because that's what was used to make that, and I'm not quite sure what happened. My other future knitting is, I've decided this year I really want to do the West Knits knit along for Shawlography, and I don't know if it was the theme. I think maybe it was, since it had to do with like modern dancing and movement, and I'm really into that right now. And so what I did is I did order yarn in order to participate for this. I ordered my yarn from Holst Garn. And I ordered it from their website, so very reasonably priced, and it got here in a great amount of time. I don't remember how long it took to get here, but it was quick. So I'm gonna show you my 5 colors first. This is our first color in Rosebud. Oh, here comes Sam. We haven't heard from him in a while, have we? Allium, and then Peony, Magenta, and Old Gold. And I'll post a picture of the image that I used to pull colors from. And I did knit up a little swatch with some stripes. My first half of my stripes just played with them in kind of like a fading order, and then I played around with striping them. So that kicks off on October 8th, and I am so excited. We're gonna finish up with some questions from the Q&A, and I'm going to try to answer these as succinctly as I possibly can. The third question that I have is, how do I handle a jog when you change colors in a striped sweater like in my pattern Blue Christmas? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link down below for Stacey Perry's video with Very Pink Knits about how she handles that jog, because that is the exact video that I used to learn what I do. I do what I do because that's what that video did. And anytime I knit stripes, that's what I always do. So I'm gonna leave Stacey's video linked down below about the technique that I use. Super easy, and her videos are super short and helpful. The fourth question asks about knitting funks. Have you ever been in a knitting funk where you're not excited by anything that you have to knit, or just don't feel like knitting? If so, how do you get out of this funk? So the question is, yes, I do. I do get in funks where I just don't want to knit or I just feel like I can't. Most of the time it is stress induced by something outside of knitting. So something happening to the kids or my family or to my husband. There's just something external going on that will not allow me to be able to do anything that would be some form of escapism. So no knitting. When I feel this way, I don't want to read a book. I can clean my house. I can do that really well when I'm feeling that way. What happens is my body just kind of is absorbing all the stress that's going on, and I just don't feel like I can relax. My hands I just can't. Just can't. My best knitting times are when I feel at peace. So everything that needs to be taken care of is taken care of. I don't feel guilty that I'm supposed to be doing something else. I just feel an overall sense of just kind of calm. We're just hanging out. Everything's taken care of. We're going about our routine. We're good. Also, if I am waiting somewhere and don't have the young kids with me, then I can knit then. Or also, if I'm listening to a book or a podcast or something, those moments, if I'm listening to something auditory, are the best times for me to work on projects that can tend to get monotonous, the same stitch over and over and over and over and over. Or if I'm watching a movie, that's what I really like those projects that have just miles of stockinette or miles of garter. I really like those projects for any auditory listening that I'm doing. It helps me actually be a better listener because I struggle with comprehension because my mind wanders off. And if I have something that kind of keeps me in a rhythm, it's easier for me to pay attention to what's happening either in my book or in a podcast or in a movie or something like that. If it's something related to knitting that's screwing up my mojo, I frog it, toss it, and forget it. That's kind of where I've come to. Most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, it has nothing to do with the pattern I'm knitting, and it's actually the yarn that I'm using. And typically, I'm really motivated by the colors that I'm using, followed by fiber. And I think I would put them in that order. For our last two questions, we're joined by a visitor. There he is. Sit down. You want to listen? Okay. The next question that someone was interested in was, how many hours do I knit a day? And honestly, that changes wildly from day to day. I can tell you the most consistent times are 20 minutes in the car line to pick up my daughter, and normally around nap time, my husband, that's when my son and I have our quiet time during the day while the baby naps. So I might knit then, and then maybe in the evening, a little bit after dinner, but it kind of depends on what's going on that night. And then on the weekends, it's just fair game. Whatever I can get in, I can get in. Then the very last question is, if I was going to Rhinebeck or any kind of fiber light festival, what would my spending plan be or my shopping plan? If I were going to go to Rhinebeck or any kind of festival of the sort, I would go in definitely with a range that I would be comfortable with spending, knowing that I could spend this much. If I went a little bit over, it would be okay, but really I'd want to stay within or under this certain price and just kind of keep my eyes out. I don't necessarily want to buy something I could have just ordered off online. I am really drawn to stories of things and how they came about and somehow having a connection to that. So it might depend on who I talk to or the story behind something. Just kind of waiting for that gasp moment. It normally leads me in the right direction. Are you ready to go snuggle and read? Yeah, okay. Well, we're gonna go snuggle and read, and I'll catch you guys in October. Bye.